He wasn't looking for trouble. He simply wanted to hold an old rifle, one he used to carry years ago, long before most of the young people around even knew its name. But when he asked, the clerk laughed, mocked his limp, called him Grandpa, and told him to leave. The old man didn't argue. He just walked out quietly, the way he always did, one step at a time. What the clerk didn't know was that the name on that man's dog tag still held weight. And exactly 1 hour later, a Navy SEAL team pulled into the parking lot. No sirens, no warnings, just 12 men walking in formation, dead silent, asking one question: where is he? Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we dive into this powerful tale of disrespect, loyalty, and redemption, let me ask you, where are you watching this from today? Drop your city in the comments, and if you believe that real warriors never forget their own, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. The gun shop was nothing special. It sat quietly at the edge of town, wedged between a bait shop and a hardware warehouse. Its windows darkened just enough to give an air of authority. Inside, the walls were lined with rifles, each resting like a trophy, and the counters displayed handguns that looked too perfect to be real. Behind the register, two young clerks leaned over their phones, half listening to the soft hum of country music filling the air. The shop wasn't busy, but it never had to be. It made its money based on image, not traffic. At exactly 10:43 a.m., the front door chimes rang. A man walked in. He didn't demand attention. His presence didn't need to. The moment he stepped inside, it felt like the world got a little quieter. Worn boots, jeans with patched knees, and a brown leather jacket older than half the staff. His face was weathered calm, and his eyes sharp beneath the brim of a faded Navy SEAL cap. He moved slowly but with purpose, his limp evident but never pitiful. He didn't glance around. He walked straight to the counter, rested his hand gently on the glass, and waited. One of the clerks looked up, forcing a smile. "Need something, sir?" The old man nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I was wondering if you still carry the M1 Garand replica from Backwall, the real stock model?" The clerk blinked. That's a collector's piece. Not something you want to fire." "I didn't ask to fire it," the man replied, his voice calm. "I just want to hold it for a moment. Haven't touched one in decades." Another clerk, a little older, laughed lightly. "That rifle's heavier than it looks. Might be too much for your back, Pops." The old man didn't smile. "I used to carry one across jungles," he said. "I can manage it across a showroom." That's when the tone shifted. The first clerk snorted too loudly. "Okay, Rambo. Unless you're buying, you're just taking up space. Let the real customers in." The second clerk added, "Yeah, we're not a museum." The old man paused, looking like he might say something, maybe correct him, maybe remind him of who he was. But instead, he simply looked down at the counter, nodded to himself, and said, "Understood." He turned and walked toward the door. No protest, no anger, just a man walking slowly back toward the edge of a country that had forgotten what some men had given for it. Inside, the clerks went back to scrolling through their phones. Neither of them noticed a woman by the ammo rack, her gym shirt and ball cap pulled low, watching the scene in silence. They didn't notice when she stepped outside 2 minutes later, pulled out her phone, and made a single call. She said 3 words. He was there. At 11:43 a.m., the parking lot in front of the gun shop began to fill, but not with customers. A matte black SUV pulled in, parking close to the entrance. The engine stayed on. A minute later, another SUV parked beside it. Then a third. No music, no movement, just quiet, humming machines with dark glass and intentions hidden behind tinted windows. Inside the shop, the clerks were still joking, still scrolling through their phones, unaware that the atmosphere outside was shifting. They didn't notice the door open. They didn't hear the footsteps. But soon enough they would. The doors opened 3 at a time, and 12 men stepped in. Their movements were deliberate and unhurried, but there was a weight to their presence that made people pause mid-step. They weren't loud. They didn't shout. But something about them made the air feel heavier. Some wore civilian clothes, some in dress uniforms. Most didn't need either. The way they walked, the set of their shoulders, the look in their eyes, they didn't need to announce who they were. It was clear by their mere presence. Their gaze scanned the street, not out of nervousness, but out of habit. They crossed the sidewalk in silence and stepped to the front door, one by one. The door chime rang softly with each person entering, but even that sound felt different. Not a single word was spoken. They simply moved into a calm, semicircular formation, facing the counter. The youngest clerk, still seated on a stool behind the register, barely looked up from his phone. "Welcome in, gents. Looking for anything specific today?" he asked without much interest, his voice almost bored. Then, as his eyes glanced up for just a second, he froze. 12 men, standing quietly, all with eyes locked on him. The oldest among them stepped forward. His hair was graying, his jaw square, his chest proudly bearing rows of ribbons, and most unmistakably, the sealed trident. He looked at the young clerk without saying a word, and then he spoke. "An hour ago," he said, his voice calm, but it hit like a thunderclap. "One of us walked through this door." The second clerk, who had made the joke about the old man earlier, shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. "Sir, I think there's been some misunderstanding." The man cut him off, with nothing but a look that silenced him instantly. "He didn't come here to be honored," the SEAL continued. "He didn't ask to be recognized. He just wanted to see a rifle he hadn't touched since Vietnam. Your staff laughed, called him Grandpa, and told him to leave. You didn't ask who he was. You didn't care." The SEAL placed something on the counter, a scorched flag patch, worn and folded. "He pulled this off my uniform when I was bleeding out in Helmand. He carried me out on foot for 22 hours with no radio, no backup, and a hole in his side the size of a fist. He never asked for thanks. But when he walked in here today, you treated him like a problem." The younger clerk swallowed hard, his gaze flicking toward the door, but it was too late. The SEAL didn't move. "We're not here for revenge. We don't need an apology." But he won't speak for himself, so we're speaking for him. Another SEAL stepped forward, placing a photo on the glass counter. The picture showed 8 men, arms slung over each other's shoulders, covered in dust, sunburnt, but all smiling. In the middle of the photo, a younger version of the same man they had mocked earlier, unmistakable. The clerk's mouth opened slightly, then closed. He hadn't known. The lead SEAL nodded slowly. "Exactly. You didn't ask." There were no threats, no demands, just the truth. The first man turned, and the others followed. 12 of them, walking out in the same deliberate way they had entered. No fanfare, no sound, just a quiet, powerful presence. The door chimes rang once more as they exited, and with their departure, the silence in the store deepened, the kind of silence no bullet could replicate. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, drawn not by curiosity, but by something they couldn't quite explain. Phones came out, not to film, but to record, just in case they forgot how it felt to witness something like this. The SEALs didn't acknowledge the crowd. They didn't need to. They got into their vehicles, one by one, and drove off without another word, their movements as calm and unassuming as they had been when they entered. But inside the shop, the air hadn't returned to normal. The youngest clerk sat slowly, his eyes fixed on a photo still sitting in front of him. He stared at it for a full minute, his mind raced and processed everything that had just happened. For the first time, he realized something. He hadn't just thrown out an old man. He had dismissed history. And now, the entire world would know who they had truly pushed out the door. By 1:45 p.m., the photo had already gone viral in several veteran Facebook groups. A customer who had arrived just after the SEAL team posted it online. In the photo, 12 men stood in complete silence inside the gun shop, all facing the counter where 2 clerks stood frozen behind the register. No fists, no shouting, just stillness, and a presence that could never be ignored. The caption was simple. When you disrespect a SEAL, you get all of them. At first, most people didn't understand the context. The post was reshared countless times with nothing but an American flag emoji. Then, someone asked, who was the old man they were standing for? That was when everything changed. By 2:12 p.m., a name emerged in the comments. James C. Beckett, a man who had been a quiet figure around town for years, polite but always alone. He wore the same beat-up SEAL Team 3 cap every day. No one had ever asked what it meant, until now. One commenter wrote, "He was my uncle's CO in 91. Saved 3 men in Panama. Never talked about it once after coming home." Another added, "If that's Beckett, we're talking about a real ghost, the kind of guy you only hear about in briefings, never in the news." Someone even found a grainy scanned personnel summary buried deep in a military archive and uploaded it under the photo. Master Chief Special Warfare Operator James Charles Beckett. SEAL Team 3. Joined in 1966. Retired in 2004. Bronze Star, Silver Star, Purple Heart, multiple unlisted commendations. Service in Vietnam, Mogadishu, Panama, and Iraq. Over 35 confirmed personnel extractions in hostile zones. No autobiography, no press coverage, no interviews, just decades of silence. Decades of doing the job. By 3 p.m., the local news station had picked up the story. The headline simply read, "Silent Visit. 12 Navy SEALs show up at gun store in support of local veteran." The article didn't give any sensationalist details. It was straightforward. A man had come in. He had been asked to leave, and 1 hour later, a team of SEALs arrived. Suddenly, a quiet, overlooked figure had become a symbol of everything people have forgotten to respect. Inside the store, the atmosphere was still thick. The clerks hadn't spoken to each other in over an hour. The photo left behind by the SEALs still sat on the counter, its silent message burning into their minds. The photo showed 8 men standing in a black and white group shot in the desert, dusty, sunburnt, but smiling. Beckett stood in the middle, arms crossed, with a half smile that said nothing but meant everything. Customers who came in after didn't ask about ammunition or tactical gear. They asked about the man in the photo. They asked if he was coming back. An older customer, a Marine from Desert Storm, stood in front of the photo for a full minute. He stared at it, then saluted it, and without saying a word, he walked out. By 4 p.m., a veteran-owned publication had published a short piece titled, "The Ones Who Stand When You're Gone." It ended with a line that would be quoted thousands of times over following days. James Beckett didn't need to speak. His silence was covered by 12 voices who chose not to raise theirs either. Back inside the gun shop, the manager arrived. He was pale, holding his phone in one hand, trying to process what had just unfolded. The photo had already been sent to him twice before he even pulled into the lot. He walked past the clerks without saying a word. He didn't blame them. He didn't speak to them. Instead, he made his way to the display case, took out the M1 Garand rifle the old man had asked to see, and placed on the counter next to the photo. Then, he grabbed a sheet of paper, wrote something by hand, and slid it into a clear frame next to the weapon. There was no fanfare, no grand gestures, just one simple line of text. He carried it once. We'll carry the memory now. Outside, someone had placed a single white flower against the door. Then, a challenge coin, then a folded piece of paper with nothing but the word respect. By nightfall, a small crowd had gathered outside the shop. Some came to pay their respects, while others simply wanted to see the place where something real had happened. There were no protests, no chants, no outrage, just quiet, a kind of reverent hush that spoke louder than 1,000 headlines ever could. As for Beckett, he didn't respond to the media coverage. He didn't post anything. He didn't grant any interviews. He went home the same way he had arrived, unnoticed, except for the first time in years, when someone passed him on the sidewalk. They didn't glance past him. They looked twice, because now, the town knew exactly who they had asked to leave, and they knew who had answered in his place. In the days that followed, something quietly shifted in town. Not dramatically, not publicly, but deeply. The gun shop, once just another business with a cash register and a rack of tactical gear, became something else entirely. It wasn't about weapons anymore. It became a place for memory. Veterans walked through the door not with a list of things to buy, but with stories to tell. Some left patches from their own units beside Beckett's photo. Others asked quietly, is he okay? No one really knew. The truth was, James Beckett hadn't changed his routine. He still walked 2 miles every morning before the sun rose too high. He still stopped at the same corner diner for black coffee, no sugar. He still sat alone at the back booth, the one no one ever dared to share. And he never once mentioned the day he was thrown out of the shop. Never spoke of the men who showed up behind him. Not to the waitress. Not to the cook. Not even to the old Marine who sometimes nodded at him across the room. But people noticed. When a local high school invited veterans to speak in history class, Beckett didn't reply. But the week after, the principal received an envelope. Inside was a single handwritten letter describing a rescue op from 1970. No name, no signature. Just a map reference and the names of the 6 men Beckett had saved. The letter was framed and hung in the school hallway without ceremony. Back at the gun shop, they kept the scorched flag patch in the display case. The owner, who hadn't been to the day of the incident, had it mounted in glass beside the rifle. He added a simple inscription, "For the man we didn't recognize, and the brothers who wouldn't let us forget." The story made its way across veteran forums, then onto talk radio, and eventually quietly into policy meetings. No one reported on it, because what happened that day wasn't protest. It wasn't a fight. It was something rarer. Men standing for one of their own without saying a word. And the message was received. 2 weeks later, the SEAL team returned, but not to the shop. They came to Beckett's diner. They didn't take a table. They didn't make a scene. They just walked in one by one and stood silently by the booth while he sipped his coffee. He looked up, met their eyes, and for a moment, no one breathed. Then the youngest among them, the one who hadn't been born when Beckett left the service, spoke. "Sir, if it's all right, we'd like to sit with you." Beckett nodded once. Without a word, they filled the booth. And for the next hour, no one in the diner heard a single sound. But everyone there remembered the silence, because in that silence, they understood everything that needed to be said. Some men don't need a title to be respected. They don't ask for credit. They don't raise their voices. They just do what needs to be done, and then disappear into silence. Chief James Beckett didn't come to prove anything. He wasn't there to be recognized, thanked, or told he mattered. He already knew who he was. What mattered was that his team knew it too. They hadn't forgotten. And when the world got small and quiet, they showed up not with outrage, but with presence. That's loyalty. That's brotherhood. That's the code that doesn't get printed on plaques or shouted in politics. It gets carried quietly, one mission at a time. Most people wouldn't have noticed a man with a limp and the faded cap, but 12 SEALs did. And now, so I'll ask you, have you ever met someone like Chief Beckett? Someone who served, who never asked for praise, who never told their story but changed lives anyway? Write their name in the comments. Tell us how they lived. Say the things they never would. They deserve to be remembered. And if this story touched you, subscribe to the Human Stories. We're here to make sure men like Beckett are never invisible again. Their silence was earned. Now it's time we speak for them. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, if you ever see an old man standing quietly in a store, a diner, or a classroom, don't ask him what he's done. Just give him space, because he's already done.